Something about the light.
I'm ready to go.
So here I am in my office with Bill Anderson, the office which contains the most valuable, the rarest books which I have for sale or in collections at the moment. And we thought we would go through and have a look at certain individual items to get some flavour of quite what I have here. So the first one I thought we should start with is the earliest book that I have at present. The earliest book on Africa was printed in Italy in 1550. It's the account of Leo Africanus, a famous book, which I've had in the past, and I have a modern edition of it, the best edition in English, which is 1896. But this book is my earliest book at present, written by a Frenchman. It's called The Travels of the Sieur Moet in the Kingdoms of Fez and Morocco during his 11 years captivity in those parts. Now the first edition of this appeared in French in Paris in 1682. So this English translation followed some years later. But it's a very significant account. This man, Moet, was en route from Dieppe in France to the West Indies when the boat he was sailing in was kidnapped by pirates off the coast of Morocco. These pirates were called in English the Salé Rovers, Salé or Salé being the port where they were based, which is currently opposite the other side of the river from Rabat, the capital of Morocco. So as the title suggests, he was taken into captivity and forced to work. He worked as a stonemason and worked on building. He wasn't put in a prison, and eventually he managed to escape. And this particular copy has at the back a very rare map, which some copies don't have. This is probably one of the earliest maps of the inland of interior of Morocco. And it says the dominions of the King of Fez by Tabul Bougiman, doctor of the Al-Quran. In other words, he was a Muslim scholar. So it was this map was put together from information given to Moet by a Muslim scholar, a Moroccan Muslim scholar. And it's bound in a lovely full calf binding in the style of the period. In other words, plain with no lettering, and then preserved in a box with the title page, with the title on top of the box. So really a nice thing. What next? Well, we thought, again talking about bindings, two examples of the same book, edited by a Frenchman called Mercier, called Mission de Khadames. So we have the one copy, which is bound in what we call quarter Morocco, with bands ruled in gilt, and marble boards and end papers. And this is published in 1863, and it's an account of a diplomatic mission, in a sense, sent by the French from Tripoli, what's now Libya, to make contact with the Tuareg peoples in 1863. It has some interesting maps and plates, but an even better copy, because it's original and in better condition, is this one, which I bought from Jenny Alsworth, a bookseller friend of mine in London. Beautiful copy in the original wrappers, so no binding at all, but also containing all the plates and the maps. Very nice. So to preserve it, Jenny had this box made. It just slips into the box, and this is in fact her description of it, which I've used with her permission. Sticking with the Tuareg, one of the most fascinating and talked about peoples of Africa and the Sahara, we have the most important early detailed work on the Tuareg by Frenchman Henri Duvevrier. This was published in 1864 in Paris. It says Exploration du Sahara, les Tuareg du Nord, the Northern Tuareg. 31 plates and a map. Very, very important book. And this man Duvevrier was only in his early 20s when he travelled into the into Algeria, into the Algerian Sahara, to meet up with the Tuareg. It includes, for example, examples of the Tuareg script, the vegetation of the area, views of different places he travelled through, and inscriptions he saw en route. So it was a pioneering work by a brave young man, very difficult to travel at that stage. Devevre, unfortunately, was plagued with illness and could only be an armchair traveller after this, after his 30s really, and he subsequently became very depressed, and I think I'm right in saying he committed suicide. What else? Also related to the Tuareg, but even earlier, is this beautiful colour plate book. It contains hand-coloured lithographs by a British military man, Captain Lyon, who accompanied another British man, Colonel Ritchie, on an expedition that aimed to discover the River Niger, which at this stage, early 19th century, hadn't been properly explored. So again they set off, like the French merchant mission, from Tripoli. That's where most of the Trans-Saharan expeditions originated. Unfortunately, they were plagued with disease on this trip. They only got as far south as Mazurk, which is in the Fezzan in southern Libya, before Ritchie died of illness, and Lyon couldn't continue further and had to return to Britain. But he did produce this wonderful book, a narrative of travels in northern Africa in the years 1818, 19 and 20, accompanied by geographical notices of Sudan and of the course of the Niger, with a chart of the routes and a variety of coloured plates, illustrative of the costumes of the several natives of northern Africa. And this is why it's so interesting in terms of the visuals. It has the wonderful map, which I won't open now, but here we have the first photograph in a European book, the first illustration rather, in a European book of the Tuareg. It says here at the bottom, drawn from nature by G.F. Lyon. In other words, Lyon saw these people and drew them there on the spot. And then it says on stone by M. Gaussy. In other words, it's a lithograph, which is on stone and hand coloured, and it's quite beautiful. And this particular copy, the illustrations have stayed very, very clean. And a 20th century book covering the same sort of region, but done by an Italian man, when the Italians had a colony in Libya, which they did between 1911 and the Second World War. We have this beautifully produced book by Angelo Piccioli, La Porta Magica del Sahara. There is an English edition of this, but it's a very modest production, whereas this is a superbly produced item. It has the slipcase to protect it, and then these beautiful decorative end papers, decorative title page. It says an itinerary from Tripoli to Ghadames. Ghadames being the object also of the Merche mission, but Ghadames is in Libya, just over the border from Tunisia, where the finger of Tunisia sticks into the desert. It's only 10 miles from the Tunisian border, and this was done in a very limited edition. So this is copy number 232 of 250 copies. And it's so beautifully done, with these illustrations within the text, and then photographs. So this was a photograph taken in Tripoli, an Arab woman, and then he gradually moved south. La Hara, the Hara is the Jewish quarter of any North African city. Tunis has a Hara, so that's part of the old Jewish quarter in Tripoli, and these are engravings, of course. We continue on. Just sumptuous all the way through. So much went into the production of this book. We then have a photograph of Nalut, moving further and further south. More engravings. Berbers of Nalut. What's this? Yes, and this is an illustration from an original watercolour. This is the tomb of a marabout, a travelling religious man from the Jebel mountain of Nerut. This place called Derg, again a photographic illustration. And we could go on, but perhaps that's enough for now. Oh, that's a nice one to finish on, because it's from a painting or watercolour. So Gadames, Khadames, seen from the southeast. So we'll put that away carefully, because it weighs about 4 kilos. And very carefully, so we don't damage these beautiful coloured wrappers. It slips back, which I've managed to do a little. Slips back into its box and back on the shelves. And finally, for now, look at the book group here. We're going to look at two Arab geographer historians, rather than European observers of Africa or the Arab world. The first is an Arab geographer of the 11th century called Al-Bakri. This is the first translation of his Arabic book on North African geography, published in Algiers in 1913. This is the second edition, which is revised and corrected. The translation was done by this man Deslan, a great French Orientalist, who also translated the works of Ibn Khaldun into French from the original Arabic. This is a very accurate 11th century geography, containing detailed descriptions of towns and cities across the North African, the Maghreb coast, including Sfax, where we're now based. And finally, last but not least, we have Al-Makrizi. In this beautiful volume, this is bound in what we call half green Morocco. It's quarter Morocco if it doesn't have these corner pieces. If it has the corner pieces also in leather, we call them a half bound. So this is half green Morocco with marbled boards, plain end papers in this case. There's no the description of the title is actually down here. Makrizi, Description topographique et historique de l'Égypte. This first part was published in 1895, and the fourth and final part not till 1920, so it took 25 years to produce the book. It's very important 14th century geography and history of Egypt. Al-Makrizi was a friend of Ibn Khaldun, the great Tunisian philosopher and historian. From Tunisia, Ibn Khaldun based himself in Cairo, and he met Makrizi there and encouraged Makrizi to write this work in the late 14th century. So I'll put that back. And just say this is that's a selection from many of the books. Most of the books here are in French, hence the binding, because French books tend to be published in wrappers, in paperback in essence, and it's not good longer term to leave them like that, so it's much better to have them in bindings. And if they're more valuable, in leather bindings. So this is Ibn Khaldun, two sets of Histoire de Berber by Ibn Khaldun. That's another set, so I have 3 sets at the moment. This is Hanator Letourneau on the Kabylie, which is northern Algeria. That's the most important book on the Kabylie in 3 volumes, etc. Yeah. Get these down here as well. The maroon Morocco labels and the green cloth.